You did it today. You were alone in a room. Maybe you were reading, maybe washing a cup, maybe just sitting, thinking about nothing in particular. And then, for no reason at all, you turned your head. You looked toward the door, toward the dark hallway, toward the empty corner behind you. Nothing was there. You knew nothing was there, and still, some quiet part of you needed to check. For half a second, you felt watched. This happens to nearly every human alive. It happened to you as a child, lying in the dark, certain that something was standing just past the edge of the light. It happens to you now, as an adult who knows better. You can be completely alone, completely safe, behind a locked door, and still feel the unmistakable weight of eyes on the back of your neck. There is a reason your body keeps doing this. It is older than you. It is older than your language, older than your country, older than farming and fire and the wheel. And far from being a flaw, it may be one of the oldest survival tools your species ever built. By the end of this, you will understand why the feeling has never gone away and why it was never supposed to. But first, notice something strange about when it happens. It is not random. You do not feel watched while you are laughing with friends in a bright kitchen. You feel it when you are alone. You feel it in the dark. You feel it in silence, in a big empty house, on an unlit street, in the half second after you turn off the light and the room goes black. The feeling has a schedule. It waits for the exact moments when, long ago, a human being was most likely to die. That is your first clue. Here is the second. The feeling has a shape. It is almost always about a face, about eyes. You do not feel watched by a wall. You feel watched by a presence, something with a mind, something with intentions, something looking back. Your brain is not detecting danger in general. It is detecting a watcher, and it is astonishingly eager to find one. Look at a car from the front and you see a face. The headlights become eyes. The grille becomes a mouth. Look at a power outlet, a cloud, the surface of the moon, 2 dots in a line, and a face leaps out at you before you can stop it. You cannot unsee it. The astronomer Carl Sagan wrote about this in his book, The Demon-Haunted World. He argued that infants who recognized a parent's face and smiled back were held and fed and protected, and the ones who could not were less likely to survive. So we became a species exquisitely tuned to find faces, even where there are none. Your brain has dedicated machinery for this. A small patch of tissue behind your ear, called the fusiform face area, lights up for faces faster than almost anything else you can see. It fires quickly, and it fires loosely. It would rather flag a coat on a chair as a person 10 times than miss a real person once. So now you have 2 pieces, a feeling that arrives in the dark, when you are alone and exposed, and a brain that hunts relentlessly for faces and minds, even in empty rooms. You might think you have already solved it. It is just imagination, a trick of tired nerves, a jumpy mind filling the silence. That explanation feels safe. It is also wrong. Because this is not a malfunction, it is a system. It has a name. And once you see how it was built, the feeling stops being a quirk and becomes something far more deliberate. Scientists who study the mind call it the agency detection device. The anthropologist Stuart Guthrie laid the groundwork in his book, Faces in the Clouds. The psychologist Justin Barrett gave it the sharper name it carries today, the hyperactive agency detection device. Agency just means a mind with intentions, a thing that can choose, that can want, that can come for you. And your brain, Barrett argued, is wired to detect these agents everywhere on a hair trigger, with the volume turned all the way up. The question is why? Why would evolution build a brain that cries wolf so often? Why would being wrong over and over again be a good thing? The answer is the most important idea in this whole story, and it comes down to a simple, brutal piece of math. Imagine you are your own ancestor, 200,000 years ago, walking through tall grass at dusk. You hear a rustle behind you. There are 2 possibilities. It is just the wind, or it is a leopard. And there are 2 ways you can be wrong. You can assume it is a leopard, spin around and find nothing but moving grass. What did that mistake cost you?
A wasted breath, a jolt of fear, a few seconds and a faster heartbeat, nothing more. Or you can assume it is the wind, shrug and keep walking, and be wrong. The cost of that mistake is everything. It is your life and every child you would ever have had and every child they would have had after that. Those two errors are not equal. They were never equal. The psychologists Marty Haselton and David Buss built an entire theory around this imbalance. They call it error management theory. When the cost of one kind of mistake is far higher than the other, evolution does not aim for accuracy, it aims for survival. It deliberately tilts you toward the cheap mistake, again and again, to protect you from the one that ends the line. So your mind was tuned across countless generations to choose the false alarm, to assume the watcher is real, to turn around. Because the ancestor who turned around and saw nothing lost almost nothing, and the ancestor who did not turn around left no descendants at all. Sit with what that means. Every single person in your family line, going back millions of years, was someone who reacted in time or who descended from someone who did. You are not the child of the calm ones. The calm ones, the ones who felt nothing in the dark, were quietly erased from the story. You are the latest result of 100,000 generations of the usefully afraid. The prickle on the back of your neck is not a weakness. It is an inheritance. It is the reason you are here to feel it at all. And here's where it turns stranger. Your brain does not only detect watchers that might be out in the world, it can manufacture the feeling of one out of nothing. The neuroscientist Olaf Blanke proved it almost by accident. His team built a setup where a blindfolded person moved a robotic arm that reached around and touched their own back, but a fraction of a second later than their hand expected. That tiny mismatch in timing was all it took. People became convinced that someone was standing behind them. Some felt the invisible presence so strongly, so certainly, that they asked to stop the experiment. There was no one there. There was only a brain, fed slightly confusing signals, doing exactly what it evolved to do, concluding that a mind was near. The presence you sometimes feel is not always coming from the world. Sometimes it is being built, in real time, inside your own skull. So what happens when you take a brain like this, desperate to find faces, primed to sense minds, rewarded for false alarms, and you drop it into a vast, dark, silent world it cannot fully see? It fills the emptiness with watchers. This is what Stuart Guthrie argues lies beneath some of humanity's oldest beliefs. The rustle in the grass becomes a spirit, the thunder becomes a voice, the dark corner becomes a presence with intentions. The science writer Michael Shermer gave the two halves of this habit clean names: patternicity, our tendency to find patterns and cure noise, and agencity, our tendency to decide those patterns have a mind behind them. Together, they may be part of why every human culture, everywhere on Earth, with no contact between them, looked into the dark and decided that something was looking back. And we have known about this feeling for a very long time. More than a century ago, in 1898, the psychologist Edward Titchener wrote that nearly all of his students were certain they could feel it when someone stared at them from behind. He tested it carefully. The power to literally sense an unseen gaze turned out not to be real, but the feeling was completely, universally real. People have always felt watched. They simply blamed the wrong source. That is the payoff to the question you started with. The reason the feeling has never left you, the reason it lives in every human on the planet, is that it was never a bug to be fixed. It was the entire point. A brain that occasionally feels watched when it is safe is a tiny price to pay for a brain that never fails to feel watched when it is not. Evolution kept you slightly haunted on purpose because the alternative did not survive. You can see the same ancient machinery running quietly through your modern day. The empty office after everyone has gone home, the mannequin whose painted eyes seem to track you across the store, the security camera in the corner that makes you stand a little straighter, the dark window at night that you suddenly cannot look at directly. None of these things have a mind. Your detector does not care. It would rather warn you about 100 harmless shadows than stay silent for the one that matters. So the next time it happens, alone in your home, the light off, that prickle climbing the back of your neck, that sudden certainty that you are not alone, you do not have to be afraid of it. But you might pause and recognize it for what it really is. It is not a ghost. It is a memory, a reflex handed down through an unbroken chain of survivors, every one of whom turned around at the right moment, in a world where turning around was the difference between living and not living to see the morning. Which leaves only one question worth asking. In a warm, locked, modern home, where nothing is hunting you anymore, is there still one spot you do not like to turn your back on? A doorway, a dark window, a stretch of hallway at night? And when you finally do turn and look, what is the part of you that is quietly, desperately hoping you do not see anything looking back?